Hello everyone, welcome back to Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming through a feminist lens. Today, the three of us are going to be talking about Women 2.0, rebooting and remaking women. So there is a mass, ever since I think Final Fantasy VII Remake was the first game to use the suffix remake, because it's a reimagining of the game rather than a remaster. And then rebooting is stuff like the Lara Croft reboots, and Resident Evil, God of War, Crash Bandicoot. There's a funny thing in that. First question is why? Why do these studios feel that their resources are better spent remaking and rebooting games that feature female characters as opposed to creating new ones?
Well,
oh my god, this is actually one of my pet hates rebooting. Sorry, I just it just really annoys me because I'm a reader, and there are so many stories out there that need writing and need doing for the first time, and we're rebooting things all the time. And I think it feels like I can understand it. I can understand as I have done game design and made a game, albeit a text-based one. There's always this feeling like, you can just go back and make it better. You can go back and do it better this time. And now that the technology's moved on, wouldn't it be great if? And, there are great games out there, really good games. And people go back and they look at it and they go like, oh, but we could fix all the mistakes that we made the first time round and make it better this time round. And when it's a popular game, there's a sort of feel, well, there's already an audience available for it, and then there's like a new generation who are going to discover this amazing game. And Baldur's Gate was the original game was 20 years ago, and they finally brought out the third one, but that's not a reboot as such, but it's a next sort of generation. But even so, I'm not saying that I hate reboots, because clearly I don't. And if it's a game that I love, and I mean, Monkey Island, they just did a thing of Monkey Island, and but I do think it's a little bit lazy. It just makes me cross, because there are so many new stories that could be told and new games that could be made and new ideas that I just get really like, why are we doing this same thing again? It just makes me really annoyed. Sorry.
No, I think it's a fair point for sure. I think from my perspective, the main things I was going to mention, obviously, like from a selling point of view, like you said, there's already an audience there. There's a fan base there, and that fan base grows older and has kids of their own and probably wants to share in that fan base. It's another thing about popular games being almost franchises as well. It's the same thing with, like, when you think about Star Wars, the first films came out in the 70s, and now they're coming out in the not too many years ago. But that shows how it kind of moves through generations, and it's like a massive audience when you think about it that way. So really what it comes down to is what's going to make us the most money through nostalgia, because obviously nostalgia is a big thing that's going to play its part with a lot of gaming reboots. A lot of people have very fond memories of popular games in times gone by, and if game developers and companies think, oh, that game, people liked that, let's do it again on this new platform, make it look shiny and new, people are going to enjoy it just as much. But it's not necessarily true. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. And again, like you said, the differences between a remake and a reboot or a reimagining of sorts as well. There's all sorts of different ways you could think about it. And I mean, just look at like GTA 5. Like that's gone from platform to platform and it's still making millions and millions of dollars, but it's more or less the same game just over and over, and people still, I just don't understand that. Like you say, like there's so many other games that people could be making, and yet they just ship out the same game for, I don't know how many years. It's probably been over 10 years now since it originally came out, and they're still pushing it as if it's like the must-have item for every gamer, which confuses me rather a lot. But because like once you've played it, you've played it. Do you need it on the next generation of platform? I have been admittedly guilty of that with the LA Noire. I bought the remastered version of LA Noire on PS4, but I have a very soft spot for that. So again, being completely hypocritical there and admitting that. But yeah, it's a funny one. It's a funny one.
It's fair to say that the two reigning kings of, the emperors, the gods of remastering Skyrim and GTA 5, they just keep on going and going and going and going. Which there is the side that it does prove that there is a massive audience for it that are willing to pay for it. So people aren't being necessarily entirely shortchanged. When things that are remasters, there are literally, you can count on one hand the remasters that are actually genuinely like worth the effort that they've put into is genuinely worth paying the price for a new game, and mainly it's remakes because they take. So Final Fantasy VII, for example, it was literally PS2 little pixels wandering around, and now they've just basically made all the women as sexy as they wanted them to be 25 years ago, and that's a bit of a theme as well. So in like say Mortal Kombat, for example, they just use the latest technology to make the women as sexy as they imagined they were when they were horny young men, and I think reboots and remakes. Why do they choose them? It is easier. It is the hard work. The story checks out. The story is tick. People care about it. The Last of Us Part 1 remake is probably the apex of remastering, because they just so many of them, they just change the textures a bit, but it still looks like a slightly more polished PlayStation PS3 game, and those are the ones where I think are being shortchanged. So delving into female characters specifically, how are female characters, what tactic do the developers take on this?
Well, in my experience of seeing a game franchise move from sort of PS1 era through to like PS3, PS4 era, and I'm talking about Tomb Raider here, I had a little sort of guidebook, like a fan book, that went through all the original games from 1 to like up to Angel of Darkness, which was by that time about number 5. And it showed the transition of the character of Laura from being like, I don't know how many polygons they said it was. It was a small number of polygons. And of course, she's all very pointy and blocky. And she's got these pointy boobs because they can't render the boobs into like a curve. And you see the as it progressed, they get more and more polygons and more. And eventually the boobs become curved and the bum becomes curved and the hair gets more detailed and the face. But like you said, it's just the more technology moves on as the years pass, and we think about game developers wanting to develop games in that way. When you look at female characters, all they're doing is just making them into this more sexualized image of women, or not in all cases, but certainly in that particular case. When you look at the difference between the first Tomb Raider and the later Tomb Raiders, like Angel of Darkness, that's certainly their intention was to objectify more and more by making use of the technology in making it a more realistic, quote unquote, body shape that is essentially not a realistic body shape, but is that making sense? I don't know if it's making sense, but in terms of that, that's what's happening.
Sorry.
Yeah, go on,
Matt. We've talked in the past about the way women look, and there was sort of like we're talking about Stellar Blade, about how that is a very sort of 25 years ago, the Lara Croft body shape, that kind of all massive boobs, massive arse, and that was sort of like the default shape of a fighty female character. Whereas now, every single female character in the modern age has the same body type as the new Lara does. It's just that sort of that slip of a girl look. One of the things that pisses me off so much about Horizon Forbidden West is she has no muscle at all, no discernible muscle at all. She looks exactly the same as Lara Croft does. It's the same sort of shape that you see in TV and film. So it's that Barbie shape. Margot Robbie is the perfect casting for Barbie.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if she says it specifically in the film, but she is.
She does. Well, it is mentioned.
She's stereotype Barbie. Yeah, she's the Barbie, and that's supposed to be like sort of the perfect shape for a woman. And they missed so many opportunities with Aloy, because somehow she has no muscle, she has no armpit hair, even though she grows up. The town is a matriarchy. There's absolutely no indication of anything to do with menstruation or birth or periods. That would be at least mentioned at some point in some way. Just they chose the absolute safest default path for her in every way. That's just such a waste. Jem, what do you think about how they approach these female characters?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about Aloy, because there was so much fuss made about the fact that they'd, done her hair so well, and the realism of the character, and yet they still kept with the sort of unrealism, the sort of unrealistic beauty standards that women are expected to adhere to, or face the wrath of the patriarchy. And I think it was quite interesting actually, because Aloy certainly in the first game, she got quite a lot of flack for being. Well, people were like going, "Oh, she's so fat." I mean, I don't think anyone could argue that Aloy was fat in either game. But yeah, that was one of the accusations that I saw in a number of articles online about her, because she wasn't as slim as many of the female characters that we see. I think it's difficult because when I think about sort of remastered games, I tend to think about, well, like you were saying, Alex, sort of going from pixelated Lara to sort of more almost the hyper-real Lara. And when you're looking at that, then it's difficult to know, like, is it, whether the little pixelated pointy boobs, is that worse or better than realistic pointy boobs? What are we actually trying to achieve? I think there is I think it's a shame that sometimes what happens is that they make a big fuss about, like, oh, look at this, we've reduced their breast size, or we've made given them a slightly more realistic figure, but then they put them in shorter shorts or a lower cut top, or they, are really pleased because they get a good boob bounce going on or whatever. And I think that is problematic, actually, because again, they're just reinforcing this idea that these hyperreal women are not. It's like a sleight of hand that's going on here. That's what I find insidious is when you're presented with something and you're told this is better. And actually it's not. It's like, it's appears on the surface to be a good thing, like these more realistic looking women and all of that. But because they are based on an unrealistic ideal, they're no more realistic than your pixelated Lara. I mean, they're not real women, no matter what way you look at it. These are not real women. And it's like in Horizon, if as you say, if Aloy was a real woman in that situation, she wouldn't look the way that she does in the game. She would be at least be more muscular. I mean, the climbing that she does, it's just crazy, and all that. She would have really, muscular arms, and I think this is where the problem comes in, and I think that's more damaging actually for people. So I think that when we're remastering stuff, it would be nice if we could think about fixing those kind of mistakes, and not just about like can we get the shape of her bum better, like the shading on her eyes, all of that. I would like to see a better thinking, but I also want to say that it is great when you see some characters that you've seen in these pixelated things and you actually see them looking like it's more like a real person that you might actually see on the movies, perhaps if not in real life. And I think that is really exciting. And I just love the realism of games these days. It's so immersive, and it's nice to take older games and update them and bring them into that world and to see them. And I think that is cool, actually.
I love the sleight of hand description, because they're exactly right. It's saying, oh, this is better. It's better. Trust us, it's better. When what is improving is definitely improving is the technology. They talk about, this is what is frustrating about accessibility. They have all the tools necessary to make every game completely accessible to everyone, but they don't have the imagination to use it. And it's the thing of mistaking technological progress and social progress are completely different. So technology can go up and up and up, and boob physics are a thing, and that just gets improved more and more. And then go, oh, look at this woman character, now that we've got all this technology to make her move more realistically. And you go, well, you're still doing the same thing as before, because there's no diversity. And when there isn't diversity in the room, then you're still going to come to the same conclusions. And one thing, there's a couple of things. I've been reading a bit of Malcolm X's speeches over the last few days. And one of the bigger things that he talks about, he only talks about people. He only talks about humans. The only things he cares about are the conditions that humans are living in. He never talks about property. He doesn't talk about land. He doesn't talk about money. He talks about the lives of people. And one other thing that marked him out as different to Martin Luther King was that he thought that he hated the concept of integration, because he was looking at it as he doesn't look at how well the most privileged black people are doing in this society. He looks at how the least privileged black people are doing and measures his perspective on that. And that is completely antithetical to what all mainstream media points at. It goes, oh, look how well the technology is doing. The technology is doing so well. Whereas what you need to do is be looking at, well, what is the technology being used for? And you're right. You're trying to tell us that it's getting better and better, but they're all still the same shape. They're just smoother. There are more polygons. And then another thing with the new, I hadn't heard much about the first Horizon game about Aloy's physique. I just thought she's just the same shape as 90% of other female characters. But then I think watching it over and over and over again, looking at having no muscle, if their goal is if they're going to, right, we're not going to sexualize her, then that just cuts off what we can do. If we're not going to try and sexualize her with the stereotypical feminine image of beauty, then we can do absolutely anything we want. But they chose to go as neutral as possible. So you could just go, well, we've got no restrictions. What would an athlete who can do all the things that she do look like? And I don't know if you follow any athletes on Instagram. They are just the most incredible physical specimens of strength and power. And there is so much character you can read it from the state of their physique. That tells you so much about them before they even speak or you know anything about them. Or if you go, oh, we do want her to be attractive and a bit sexy, I defy you to watch the Olympics and tell me that they aren't the most stunning examples of beauty that you could imagine objectively. So you go, well, just copy that then. If you want to sexualize her, then so it's just this being trapped in this tiny little box of what is possible. And I completely agree about the frustration with it. We're sort of fluctuating between questions. So a little bit about problems, good bits. Would you rather, what is rebooting and remaking female characters? How does it compare to creating new female characters? I'll pick someone.
It's a difficult one.
If someone doesn't volunteer.
I can go. I would say that it runs the risk of not really presenting a sort of modern take on those characters. So if you take an existing character, then unless you rewrite the whole story or anything, you're stuck within the confines of whoever that character was. And so I think there is this risk that you end up making the same mistakes again. You might update it a little bit, but you're not going to completely. So, I mean, don't mean to pick on Lara here, but with Lara Croft, she's still within her, the same sort of basic framework that she has always been, and she has changed a lot over that time in her personality, but her basic setting of being, from this very wealthy background, being, having these father issues and, all of that is still there. And it comes with with a character when they're rebooted, and it influences the way that that designers and writers will work with that character. Whereas if you create a brand new character, then that character is being created within today's context. And much as we complain about the inequalities that are still present in today's society, we have moved on in many ways, and at least our thinking has moved on in many ways. Games companies, while still woefully lacking in diversity, are more diverse today than they were, in the 80s. So characters designed by today's games designers would probably be very different from those designed in the 80s and the 90s. And although they might put their slant on those characters in a remake, they're still confined by, the basic stories that surround those characters. And so I like to see updated characters, and I think that if they do, then it needs to be done very mindfully and looking at what can they actually do to make these stories more modern and more suitable for today's audience. But I actually would rather see less, certainly less reboots and remakes. Remastering is a slightly different thing, I think, but the reboots and the remakes, I would like to see less of those and more new products for those reasons.
Yeah, I think newer IPs or newer characters give a lot more scope for just celebrating diversity. Like, we talked about it a lot on the pod, and I kind of wanted to jump back on something that Matt mentioned, and also to kind of build on what Gem's mentioned as well about the importance of diversity. Matt, when you mentioned about how beautiful Olympic athletes are, it just really struck me as really interesting, because in my day job, I often talk about the roots of medical model thinking, and when we look at body image and bodies relating to disability in particular, and how it all stems from when we think about how the body was thought of in ancient times with the Olympics and the competition for physical prowess and reaching this physical ideal peak that's not necessarily realistic, but it was everywhere, and it was kind of not propagandized, but it was like considered an ideal for people to reach at the time. And I think when we think about how bodies are represented in the media, there's an awful lot of crossover with obviously unrealistic representations of bodies in general. But one of the good things when you look at the other side is that when you think about women presenting that ideal in terms of physical prowess, there's something almost, I guess maybe one of the reasons they chose not to make Aloy so muscly is because some people probably find it a bit taboo. It's not how a woman should be, but in its own way, it is a mark of defiance, and it's saying, well, yes, actually women can be like that, and that's okay. I'm winding across the topic rather a lot, but I think what's the exciting thing is about thinking about how we portray bodies moving forward, is that we can choose to portray all sorts of different types of bodies in lots of different ways, and hopefully they will become more acceptable ways to portray characters in games, and it shows that we can find beauty in all types of bodies and all types of people, and that there is beauty to be found in all of us, not just one particular set of bodies or particular peaks or ideals, and that we should explore that more within the gaming world.
Another element of the Olympics example is it's from every nation on the planet. Bodies from every place on the planet.
That's very true.
And their bodies are 100% geared to achieving a purpose. It's not about how they look. They look incredible. They look however they need to look for their sport. And it's all, they do it, they're not sculpting themselves to look good. They are trying to undertake a certain action. And you've got the entire spectrum of body types. You look at the Olympic weightlifters, these massive hench women. They're not all like V shapes. They're not all like sculpted. There's so many different. If you could just go, well, what does Aloy do? She runs, she fights, she uses a bow, she rides mounts. Just look at what athletes look like who do that and go from there. And I defy you to find me athletes that don't just resonate with power. And power is attractive. And so they're just completely missing the point. If they're trying to, if they're one of their goals is to have them be attractive,
Matt, you're a feminist. You're a male feminist. So, you don't find powerful women threatening. You find them attractive, and but there's a large group of men out there who do find powerful women scary. And I think that's the problem, that the games industry is pandering to those people and is designing for those people. And we've talked about that before, about how whenever we have female characters that have strength, physical or power in some way, they're usually given some kind of fundamental flaw or fundamental need or fundamental something that makes them, not quite so threatening to all those poor guys who are a bit worried about them. And so I do think that, I absolutely agree with you, Matt. I think that, that people that are at the top of their game are awesome, and I would love to see people being characters being designed to look like they can do the things that they do. And I also think that, Alex's point about, not over glorifying one type of sort of being at the top of your game, one form of it, which is, a very unrealistic position for the majority of people. But then what Aloy does is extremely unrealistic for the average person. So I think, but I do think, you're not your average guy there, Matt, in respect to this. You can take that as a compliment.
Thank you. I was wondering where that was going. Like, I'm a weak, weedy man who's scared of women. But no, yeah, that's such a good point. There's this massive toxic element of young men being conditioned by the very popular kind of. They're all just con men trying to milk money out of them and distracting them from the fact that the ruling elite are robbing them blind and that everything of them is their fault. And we'll talk about next month is 19th of November is International Men's Day. So I've got some stuff locked and loaded for that. So hopefully that'll be an interesting conversation. I think we've done a good amount of time. Is there anything else pressing before we close?
No, not for me.
Cool. No. In that case, everyone, thank you for watching or listening. Where to find us every week. We now have a PayPal account that if you want to send us a one-off donation, because Patreon isn't for everyone, you just need to go into PayPal and send it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. And if you want to sign up for some bonus content, you can go onto our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye. We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.